Welcome to another episode of Till the Bottom. In this episode, we discuss gender equality, gender roles, and consent. To engage with us in conversation, we have Dr. Swati Krishnan. Swati is a biophysicist who recently obtained her PhD in the Technical University of Munich. Our rather intense conversation mainly meanders around differences or inequalities between men and women in terms of dating or courtship behavior, career choices and opportunities, and if this imbalance is due to cultural imposition or arises out of our genetic makeup. So, without wasting any more time, let's start talking.
Welcome to not just another episode of Till the Bottom, with a very special guest coming all the way from Munich, Swati Krishnan, Dr. Swati Krishnan.
Yes.
Sorry. You got your PhD this year.
August
this year, so very
newly,
shiny.
Newly minted.
You might correct me if I get this wrong because it's really not my area, but if I understood correctly, what you're doing is synthesizing membranes or
membrane proteins, making synthetic membrane proteins.
Okay, at TU Munich.
Yes.
Okay.
So it's a biophysics lab where they make a synthetic version of what happens inside cells with membranes
I think that was
and trying to recreate
it.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
Mm-hmm. And trying to understand how it works.
Yeah, and it's super cool.
Yeah.
It's super cool.
That's important.
That's important.
Yeah.
And okay, well, I believe you that it's super cool, but even though it might be incredibly cool, we're not gonna talk about that today.
Damn it.
Damn.
What we're gonna talk about, and now I'm a little bit hesitant about saying exactly what we're gonna talk about because we always said at the outset this is gonna be the topic, and then we don't know what happens. Conversation gets derailed, and it just organically flows in many different directions. But the idea is to mostly center this conversation around the topic of feminism or women's issues or general perceptions of what's feminine, what's masculine, and how that affects society, how that affects the interaction between men and women in all different aspects of like the workplace or everyday interactions, etc. I mean, the topic was going to be vaguely ordered around sex and gender, and all that stems out from that. And well, we thought this time we just want to jump in directly into controversy from the get-go.
Yes.
So I thought that I might open just reading a little quote from this book. Probably you already saw in the camera which book it is, but if not, that's even better because part of the punchline of this quote is precisely where it's coming from. So this quote says, economically, men and women almost form two castes. All things being equal, the former have better jobs, higher wages, and greater chances to succeed than their new female competitors. They occupy many more places in industry, in politics, and so on, and they hold the most important positions. Now, the thing that grabbed my attention from this quote is that it sounds incredibly contemporary, right?
Yeah.
It sounds like something that it could have been written on an article today or yesterday. But it's actually from The Second Sex, which is a classic feminist text from Simone de Beauvoir. And this was written in 1949. So I immediately thought, well, it's quite attention-grabbing that many years have passed since then, and this particular approach to the current status, to the status of women, it seems to be still echoed very much verbatim from this. It could be echoed from this book verbatim without any change. And then I just wonder, so what is it? Is it the things that have not changed at all from 1949? Or is it that I have no problem assuming that this might have been the case at the moment, and I even have no problem assuming that this is still the case. If you sample positions of power, you look at the numbers of presidents, prime ministers, and so on, or even positions in academia, and the highest echelons of academia, or whatever, you name it, you're more likely, or CEOs, you're more likely to find a significantly larger fraction of men occupying those positions than women. So I have no quarrel with, let's say, this data point. This might have been the true in 1949. This might be still the true today. But the reason why I find this interesting is that I think it's undeniable that the situation for women and in society as a whole has evolved since 1949. So what's the reason then? What's underlying this stagnation, at least referring to that single data point? I don't know. Or what is your opinion about this situation?
I'm a little bit more on the cynical side. So I don't think things have changed. It's not like it hasn't, but it's slower than what it needs to be. I mean, because you have, like we spoke, if you have gender-based occupations, then it's very difficult to get out of that kind of conditioning. Then you're not going to provide chances to people who want to enter into new fields. Yeah. That is one of the major problems. But I have a question. What exactly has been revolutionized in society since 1949?
Okay, do you want to jump in and say something about this?
Go for it.
Okay. Now, this is in 1949 in France.
Yeah.
Something that changed dramatically in many countries and was, for instance, the gaining the right to vote for women. That's one thing that...
When was that?
In 1949, that had only been happening for, I think, 4 or 5 years in France. In France, France was kind of late, actually.
Considering
compared
all the
to other European
ideas coming in so quickly.
What was suffragette? When was it? That's
in England, I think it was 1928. 1928, around that time.
Okay.
It was when the suffragette movement got the vote right for women in England.
Okay.
There were other countries that got there first. I think Sweden, that should come as no surprise, or Iceland. Something like that. It's 1915 or something like that. Anyway, it was rather new. And in France, it was really, really recent. You know, we're talking about 4 or 5 years or something. I think it was in 44 or 45 when Charles de Gaulle instituted that as a right for everybody and every member of the population. Then came other countries. Actually, Brazil was before France. I think Brazil was 38. And Mexico 49 or something. I don't know India. Anyway, the point is that
as soon as it became independent, I guess. I guess before that also, like the Congress Party then.
Yeah, we had women, but like 1 or 2, sure.
Not 1 or 2, but very underrepresented.
Yeah, very underrepresented, sorry. Yeah.
Anyway, so that was rather recent then, right? So it should not be crazy to think that the political consciousness of women as a group had not been... It was a new thing, you know. It was in its very infancy. So probably there was still not a unified movement to reflect or to defend the interests of women as a group in the political sphere or anything like that. So it was rather new. There's another issue, the contraceptive pill. When was that introduced?
I think 70s.
Yeah, something in the 70s. So that had not happened yet. And I think we would agree that that was one of the
That's a huge
landmarks.
Yeah.
To allow women to have control over their reproductive cycle, the reproduction basically. That was a huge change.
I mean, that brought about medical control, but socially people are still against women controlling their reproductive
Absolutely. Yeah.
It depends where. Well,
I think
US.
So there are remnants of that in every society. Like
against the pill, against contraceptives?
No, not against the pill, but the cultures haven't evolved their concept of purity as along with as the contraceptive comes in. So I don't know, like So the whole narrative is before the contraceptive pill, when a woman has sex, she's playing a much more dangerous game in comparison to a man. I think this is something that Brett Weinstein and I forget his wife's name, Heather Graham.
Heather Heyer. His wife, right?
Yeah.
Heather Heyer. Oh, fuck, I forgot.
I think they articulated it in a Joe Rogan podcast where they said that the contraceptive...
This is so sexist. We remember the name of the guy, but not the name of the lady. Oh my god.
But that's also because Brett Weinstein has given a lot more public talk.
Heather Haim.
Heather Haim.
Yeah. No sexism. I cancelled the
You're not at all
sexism
sexist now.
in real time.
You solved it.
I backtracked. Fixed. Anyway.
So the whole logic behind that was that pre-contraceptives, a woman, when she had sex, had a much larger roulette game being played out.
Yeah.
Because and then it became very important who you're choosing as a mate. So it became really important that they would withhold and really prevent like the bad elements to come and basically impregnate her. In comparison to now, when they can have a control over their like pregnancy the factors. So they basically can play the game the men play with respect to exploring their sex.
In principle.
Yeah.
In principle, yes.
So there are two things. Firstly, if you think contraceptives really changed the game, which they did, going a step further would be women being allowed to raise their kids on their own. Yeah. Then you don't, really, really supporting the women to do that.
That's a step further.
That's a step further. Secondly, contraceptives actually being introduced, but they've not been really told about to people, like girls in India, for example.
So I'm with you with respect to that. Like, culture hasn't evolved.
It hasn't evolved.
The concept of purity for women, like that they should still withhold.
Actually, not even purity. People don't even know of the options of those existing.
But so even regarding sexual education, it's really lacking.
Yeah, and it's also very taboo. Like, it's not something that if you find a pill in a girl's bag, it's not going to be, I know.
I had a conversation, I'm not going to name names, but with a Vietnamese friend, and she told me kind of exactly what you're saying about the sexual education that she got in Vietnam back in the day when she was, in principle, nominally, she got sex ed when she was around 13.
Okay.
And they talked about contraception, but kind of in the abstract. Like, there are contraceptives, there are condoms, and you use them this way, but never really explicitly saying where does it go, how should be positioned, and so on. It's never made explicit enough so that they actually know exactly how to use them. Yeah. And she was telling me that one of her friends thought that actually just by putting a condom on your finger, then you could avoid pregnancy, and that was the level of ignorance because sexual education was just kind of like a pantomime of what really sexual education should be. So they talk about pregnancy and what happens with sperm meets the egg, but they never told them, well, how the sperm gets there in the first place. Yeah. So she got shocked when she found out that people actually had to get naked, or at least partially naked. to some crucial parts need to be exposed to trigger the mechanics of pregnancy. So
you can't wear gloves, but
not if you want to have a baby. Anyway, my point is that what I wanted to say, I think it was kind of fitting with the discussion. So I don't know how it is in India. I don't know if sexual education is that ridiculous or not.
No, but even if you know the existence of the pill, it's a taboo. Like, my house, if I have a pill in front, it's not going to be very welcome.
It's a taboo
to have the pill.
To be known as the girl that takes the pill.
Yeah, because it implies that you're having sex.
And it's not just that, like we have so much reservations in trying when we go and buy the condoms.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But condoms, yeah.
But it exists there as well, right? And sex education is a nonsense. It's an absolute nonsense. Like I remember when we were.
When do you get sex education?
8th grade, so that's.
Oh,
you did. I didn't. We had something when we were like 16, and most of the people were giggling when the whole reproductive cycle and stuff was being explored.
Oh no, we had.
So there was no nuanced discussion.
So we had like a movie which was just played. And
a movie.
Yeah, but that's like the minute that they're supposed to do something, you have this, biology diagrams of a penis and a vagina, and that's about it. And then you figure it out. You don't know where one goes and what happens. And
these organs are involved.
Yeah, exactly.
The mechanics, we leave that for your parents to explain.
Oh, parents don't get involved in this.
Then how do you?
No. This is in school.
Wait.
So this is in school where one of the teachers is supposed to talk about it. So in my case, what
So
happened?
learning
was,
by doing or what?
No.
I'm answering this.
So we were shown the reproductive organs in a very biological manner,
exactly.
and said that this is how whatever conception or whatever happens.
Yeah.
And after that, we got a moral lecture
About how you shouldn't do it.
you should be very responsible and ideally after marriage. And well, in not exactly those terms, but
as a moral
in principle, that's
story,
what was told to us. And that's pretty much it. We basically learn over here each other. Like when we are exploring, we have learned from each other and watching illicit websites to figure out what happens how.
Yeah.
Which is not the best. But no, it's not just about sex education. Even if you know about it, like in an urban city. Yeah, urban cities probably. Yeah, and it's not normal to do it. It's not normal to have...
Or not normal to talk about it.
No, it's not. Actually, it should be the other way. It should be applauded that you're taking care of yourself. And you're safe and you are educated and you're making good choices for your life. It's exactly the opposite. It's a taboo.
That's what common sense should dictate, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. But that's, it's maybe more cultural, like, reservations.
No, it's probably tied to that concept of
Purity.
and
because as soon as you're getting married, all the aunties are
Start
coming
asking
there
about
to advise the woman about
how to do it.
Yeah,
but that comes.
it's going to be a special night and this and that, like preparing you up, warming you up.
That comes from an exacerbated sense of protectiveness towards female sexuality.
Yeah.
From mostly, well, I don't know, mostly from men or from women. I think probably the whole society in some parts of the world is engaged in protecting the female sexuality. I'm not using protecting here in a positive way. Just to clarify, like, oh, well done. I'm so proud that is happening. That's so nice. You know, I'm mostly, well, protecting is a euphemism. They are taking control. Society, be it the family or be it society at large, probably equally males and females at some point, are so concerned about somehow controlling the sexuality of the female members of their families or society as a whole. So that's why that's a huge problem in so-called honor cultures, like some Middle Eastern cultures, where the honor of a family or of a group of people is basically vested on the female members of that family. So it's pretty much, again, honor in this case is a euphemism. What they care about is about the virginity of the female members of the family or the clan or the tribe or whatever. And if they happen to have premarital sex or sex with somebody that for whatever reason the family or the clan or the tribe does not approve of, then they can get into real life-threatening situations.
How is it with Mormonism? Like, is it also an honor culture?
Mormonism, I have no idea. No, not about that. I have
no, because they are also really...
No, they are polygamous, right?
Mormons
are polygamous.
Yeah, they were.
Oh, they're not anymore?
Not anymore.
Now the narrative is to have as many babies as possible right after you get married, but not do not like, it is really strongly like prescribed that you do not have sex before marriage there as well.
Yeah, but that's you want to say something?
No. I mean, I remember them being very polygamous, but maybe
after they were
marriage.
No. The concept changed at some point.
Right after the foundation of the religion, they were supposed to be polygamous, and they started in Utah, right?
Yeah.
And then the Utah wanted to become a state. Actually, we heard this with Richard Dawkins. I don't know. I think so. Anyway, we went to a talk in Berlin. Richard Dawkins. Amazing. Anyway, I think he talked about. Maybe I'm
it was
Michael
Shermer, because I have been listening a lot to him, and he's talked about that.
Yeah. Okay. And the point is that he actually talked about this. That Mormonism started big time in Utah, and they had this practice of polygamy.
Yeah.
You know, obviously restricted to the males. You know, the males could have their harems, basically multiple wives. And but when Utah wanted to become a state of the United States of America, then the federal government, well, yeah, you're more than welcome, but you need to ban that thing.
Why?
Because it's not acceptable.
That has nothing to do with
Call it-
freedom of state. It's
But it's progress anyway. Let's take it.
yeah, I get it.
Like in India, that was the big conflict, right? Like,
Yeah.
one of our famous movie stars,
Yeah.
he converted to Islam so that he can marry another woman.
Yeah, that's true.
So because in India it is legal to have, or maybe it's not legal anymore. I don't know.
It is.
It is
but
still legal.
It is still legal.
For
but
Muslims?
yeah,
For Muslims to
but
have
not
more
for
than
Hindus.
one wives.
Not for, but that's the I know it's polygamous because there's a polygamy beer which comes in Utah.
Polygamy what?
There's a beer.
Beer?
Yeah, and it's the sticker is a man with like 100 women around it.
Ooh.
That's how I know about this.
Is that, do they sell that in India?
No,
In the
Utah.
US, in Utah.
yeah, exactly.
Polygamous beer.
Yeah, it's called polygamy, the beer. That's good beer, but whatever.
Were you there or you
I was
found
there.
that? Amazing.
Yes.
Anyway, that's
Yeah.
I was gonna say that's great, but okay.
To each his own, right? No, but it's surprising because India was a state where Kama Sutra, nation where you had Kama Sutra, we were sexually very liberated, come to British colonization. I don't know if we can blame everything on that. They moved
No,
on.
I think it's also Islam also came in before that. So we're talking
yeah.
about Kama Sutra, which is like 2000 BC or something.
Yeah, but then like
So a lot has happened since.
but Islam came only till the north. It did not come so much to the
Sure,
south.
it did.
I mean the Mughals.
But
sorry.
okay,
Yeah,
but
yeah,
here,
sure,
but I
yeah.
have a question about this. I'm very ignorant about this, so I'm just gonna just wing it. I don't know. Yeah, sure. You had the Kama Sutra, which obviously triple X kind of book, right?
I don't know, never read it, but sure.
Yeah, well, I think everybody knows that. Yeah, but so you had the Kama Sutra, but the fact that that book existed doesn't mean that it was some sort of propaganda for people to have an openly. I don't know.
I think there were a lot of
crazy
liberal
sexual
concepts
life.
and liberal philosophies that over the years
That
have
might,
come out.
yeah. What I'm
Dropped
saying
out.
is that you can perfectly imagine a society where that book exists.
There's a dissonance.
And then they still tell you, that's a great. This is all you need to know about sex, and these are so many sexual related advices that you can get, and they are awesome. But practice them once you get married, and probably we will decide who you get married to. And stuff like
No. That is like gesticulation. From
But
the
that's
other
not
side.
true because you have like sculptures and stuff
you
which
have
is
like
depicting
it was
society.
really celebrated. A lot of our
Yeah.
temples have all
Homosexuality
these
as
things
well.
getting celebrated for years.
Does that mean that it was a incredibly promiscuous society, or what is it that you're saying?
So that's the thing, right?
But then the caste system. I mean, how does this work?
No, that's because India is a big country.
Yeah,
So
it's
different things propped up in different places, and some things. So
the region where the Kama Sutra arose, are you saying
I
that
think it's most likely that's also the Vedic,
was a-
Vedic principles also came.
it was
out
a
of that.
free love kind of hippie society from the 70s? Is that what you're saying?
It could have been something which is only allowed to a certain class. of people.
Or it's just an observation.
That's another.
Yeah, probably it's also an observation of
Yeah,
society.
because a lot of them were dasis, right? And dasis is like
the temple Devdasis, yeah.
Khajuraho.
Yeah.
Again, but I still believe that doesn't really say much. For in Victorian times,
Yeah.
also one category of books that sold the most were sexual books.
Yeah, erotica.
Yeah, erotic novels and stuff like that. And the society was the opposite of that. They condemned. My point is, I don't know if that was the situation in India or during the time of the Marquis de Sade. He also wrote novels that are, he's famous because of the level of eroticism in his novels and sadism and masochism and so on, all sexually related topics. And they sold like hot bread, throughout France.
Yeah.
But the society was very condemning of promiscuity and of living an open sexual life and so on.
So as far as I
just
know,
to have the book doesn't mean
Yeah.
that.
No, but if you
So all the other books also, like there is no evidence of the other narrative that you're talking about.
and in India, if you have a problem, you break the temple, or those are still alive. The sculptures are still there. It's all over the country. It's not just.
That's
in the
because
West.
it's got the religious banner. I think if
What is religious in Ajanta Ellora?
so. No. The fact is, it is first a Jain temple or a Hindu temple,
okay, I got
and
what you
then
mean.
the other thing comes in.
Okay, yeah. They're the gods doing it.
Yeah.
Okay. Anyways, but we have to, at least maybe we all agree that it all took a nosedive after the British came in. So
if the case is,
I would go even further beyond. Like, I think. Yeah. So never mind. If that's what happened, that's what happened. But I don't think. Like, we have gone through periods, like every society probably evolved periods of progressiveness with regard to some things, and then some different direction of morality at some other point of time. And so it could be that like in your head what is playing is that it could be that all these things were preached, but the actual lifestyle might have been still.
All I'm saying that the existence of the book by itself, it does not prove. The thing is, I'm ignorant. I don't know. I don't know what was.
Unfortunately, we are also ignorant in this direction.
All I'm saying is that it's hard to make the argument, or there are some caveats in that argument that because the book exists and dates back to I don't know which year in which part of India, and the book is openly sexual, that means that the society itself was also open. Living a free love kind of a situation.
Okay, but at least from there onwards, we did not progress further. We kind of deteriorated further.
That's
unless you look at some cults here and there. Like, we have had very promiscuous cults here and there.
Osho.
Have you watched the Netflix?
Yes,
amazing.
It's
amazing.
It's just.
And there's also this other cult, somewhere in east of India, who were basically. It was a society where they went against pair bonding. So there was a sense of free love within that society. And I gained some traction. They were also devotees and also praying to God and all that. So a lot of devotional songs. So they have their own genre of music and everything. So it lasted for a bit. Yeah. Anyways.
Yeah, but then worldwide it has all gone nose down in terms of reproductive rights. Not Europe.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's. Yeah. I might have a bit of an issue with that. So, what I wanted to say is, we obviously got sidetracked because this is what always happens in this podcast. And now let's try to come back to the main road. So, the main road, what we were saying is that there were events, important events from 1949 and onwards that helped the evolution of society as a whole, at least in some parts of the world, towards equalizing the societal roles of females with respect to males. And among those where voting was kind of a new thing, some countries were lagging, so by 49 not all countries had it, and some countries are just happened 50 years ago, less than that. I don't know exactly, but for sure you can find those countries. But then came the introduction of the pill in the 70s, and that liberated women because it gave them indubitably more control over the reproduction. But also in reality.
Yeah, but like if it's not practiced, if it's existing.
The point, the point I want to make there is that there might be taboos against using contraceptive, or not necessarily against using contraceptives, but about against being open and being an open consumer of contraceptive pills, for instance, if you're a girl. But those are very geographically specific, right? So it's not the same situation here.
But regarding
the so again, so this discussion about feminism can go into many directions, but it really depends on which area of the world we want to focus. Because the level of progress regarding women issues, it's the same statement is very relevant in some cases and not so relevant in some cases. Want to say something now?
Yeah, I mean, so just going back, so there are some worldwide relevant problems, right? Like because we did not have very good sex education. I don't know how it happens in Europe or in Mexico. Probably
kind of crappy.
But your parents talk to you about it. It's not taboo. Okay. But still, women have like Indian girls especially have huge problems with. I'm not going to generalize, but in my opinion, probably there's a lot of confusion in terms of consent. And what is very interesting is like when you talk to European counterparts or women, they are
generally speaking.
I mean,
it's fine. Generally speaking.
Generally speaking, they also seem to have the same kind of emotions associated with consent.
Regarding what constitutes consent?
What constitutes consent, and like how
it's misinterpreted by the other sex.
actually more how you identify it. I mean, like, is it okay to give in because of some kind of guilt of not
So
offending
you're
the
saying
other
there's
person?
an inbuilt psyche
Yeah.
issue.
Yeah, and this is something that, okay, my sample set is 6, but it's diverse.
No, it's fine, and yeah, we can. I mean, again, I think I said it before here that anecdotal evidence becomes statistics after a certain number, and then you can gather things like those from many
Be very
different
careful
places.
about that also.
Yeah. Anyway, but
Just to state it out.
yeah, but I mean, if it's obviously we're saying something that it's obviously not true, then we will get to know about it, right? There will be pushback, at least from one person here, hopefully. Anyway, consent, that's a very interesting and very tricky topic. You know, it's like walking the tightrope.
Yes.
Yeah.
But that's what we don't want to do here. Well, I would like to talk about consent.
Go for it. Yeah.
Yeah. So what? I don't know. Let me see what you think about this.
Yeah.
I was listening to a video from 1994 the other day. Charlie Rose. He had in his TV show, he had Christopher Hitchens, Naomi Wolf, which is a feminist author, Rebecca Walker, another feminist author, some other guy that I don't remember his name, and another lady that I don't remember her name. And they were talking about consent. And then, this is 1994. At that time, it was published, I think, in the New York Times, or one big magazine in the US, something called the Antioch Rules regarding consent. And it came from one university. I don't know which, probably even Antioch is the name of my university, and I don't know. Point is that those are the name of the rules. And those were rules regarding consent. And basically what these people that made the rules were proposing as the ideal is that you should be asking for consent at every stage of a sexual interaction, from beginning to end. So, like, may I touch your hand? And then you get, yes, you should. And then you move a little bit further.
Yeah.
Is it okay if I kiss your lips? Okay, yeah, that's all right. Is it okay if I unbutton your blouse? Yeah, maybe. And then you need to keep asking again, like, is it okay if I kiss you again?
Yeah.
And those were the rules. Now, I don't know if you want to say something about that, if you have already an opinion about that. Or
I think that's how it should be done.
I think it's ridiculous.
Yeah.
You think that's how? Do you think that's ridiculous? Actually, I have a point more. Sometimes verbal consent is actually not even true, because if you're persuasive and you're asking again and again, then it's not even. It's not even. I'm just I don't know. Maybe men need to also evolve a certain amount of emotional intelligence in order to understand what the dynamic is. Okay, let's do it. It's not consent.
Yeah, I said this example as
fair enough. Yeah.
I said this example as what I consider consent on steroids. It's extreme. It seems extreme to me, and there was actually kind of recently. I think it was last year or something, that one of these online outlets, Vox or BuzzFeed or one of those, actually produced a video about that, about a couple engaging basically in the Antioch Rules, and they tried to make it look like, it can be sexy, it can be hot, if asking for consent at every single step of the sexual act. They tried to make it sexy. They got tons of backlash because it is so not sexy. I mean, that level, which I consider extreme.
I agree with that. But I think Swati's point here is more on the level that the way men go for asking for consent can be pushy and very intrusive.
I have a question. I mean, how much of feelings do men associate with rejection in terms of sexual act?
A lot.
Right.
Yeah.
Which is a lot of pressure. And if you, especially if it's not a stranger, if it's someone you care about, then it's complicated. Then it's not like you don't care, but it's not that, this is all, of course, like, I've been thinking about this also because I've been listening to podcasts after the Me Too movement and stuff. These are not thoughts which have even been in my head, which should have been there. Because you're not even like, you don't feel good after a certain interaction, but you don't really know why. You don't really...
You mean regretting something that you did?
Yeah, you're regretting something that you did, but you all say, okay, you took one for the team or whatever, and then move on. Which is very... I mean, there the power dynamic is really skewed.
Yeah.
Or, I don't know.
So the balance, I mean, the difficult thing to set there is how much regret. I mean, everybody regrets about stuff related to sexual encounters or sexual interactions, or I don't even mean going the full way and having sex. I mean anything of any kind of interaction of a sexual nature, kiss or name it, whatever it is. So it does happen in your lifetime that you're gonna regret some of them because maybe you were too drunk, maybe you don't even like that person anymore, but for whatever reason, at that moment it seemed like an okay idea to go ahead and do it.
Yeah.
And then later it's like, oh, well, I wish I didn't do that. Now, I think the issue here is how do you look at that retroactively? Do you see that as a breach of consent and therefore some sort of abuse? Or do you see it as, well, that was stupid. I should not do that again. I'll be more observant the next time and I will just take, I mean, this is part of being an adult in some way.
But it depends on when the no has come into your mind. If it's after that you regret it, or if it's, you know, if it's during or before and you're trying to stop it and the person's being persuasive. Not persuasive, not in a monstrous manner.
Yeah, sure, but that's very important. The fact that you said no should already plant a flag there, you know? That can be remembered. It's something that should not be taken back by any of the persons involved. If you're in a situation in which the guy is insisting and being persuasive and so on, and then he goes to and forces some physical contact or something, and you said no, and then he keeps on trying, you know, expecting that, you know, it's maybe this barrier of resistance that I just need to overcome, but actually she wants it, or I will make her want it somehow because of my charm or whatever. And that no thing cannot be erased. It should not be erased.
Yeah, but it does, and
that's how.
No, but so what you would wish for is that the men are more perceptive and aware of the fact.
I think it's a double game. Like, I think women also need to be more confident in saying no, and that comes with a lot of social conditioning again.
And that is where the conditioning has to evolve.
Totally.
To train women to say no.
Yeah, to have the confidence to say
and
no.
also men to be more perceptive.
Yes.
Yeah, that I agree.
And that could be a direct direction towards like proper constructive conditioning.
Yeah.
In that direction.
You're familiar with the Aziz Ansari story?
Yeah.
Because that's kind of like this. That was kind of like this.
But whose side are you on? I mean, there's no side to be on there.
I think, okay, so this is a complicated topic.
Yeah.
And we can flesh out. Are you up for this? I mean, I think it's something that almost everybody knows, right? Or most people that are likely listening to this probably have some background knowledge on that story.
Yeah.
So just to quickly recapitulate what happened there is that a girl, I don't remember her name, she met Ansari in a party, and she was carrying a camera, or he was carrying a camera, or something like that. But she saw the opportunity of like, I will bond with this guy through the fact that we both happen to be amateur photographers or something like that. So she managed to get his number, or he got her number or something like that. And she was initially very excited, you know, because he proposed, okay, let's go have a date. And she was all up for it, and they were messaging, and she was even telling her friends, I'm going on a date with Aziz Ansari, so on. And then they went on a date, they had dinner, he took her to his place, and he already interpreted that like, I don't even know what was in his mind exactly, but by the recollection, based on the recollection of this girl, he must have taken that as an incitement, okay, you know, this will naturally lead to a sexual encounter, she's already here. And so he made the move and then started this sexual interaction. And it seemed, if I remember correctly, in the beginning she was going along, but then after a point where he basically wanted to undress her or ask her for oral sex or something like that, she said, no, I don't want to do that. And he kind of said, okay, but then after a certain amount of time, I don't know if it were minutes or seconds or whatever, he insisted again and went on to the tactics to, okay, maybe I just need to keep on insisting and it's going to happen. So he did that several times. Every time she didn't, there was always in between some, I suppose, kissing and kind of,
You fleshed it out. You really
yeah.
made flesh it out.
Yeah, because the details are important.
Yeah,
This
yeah.
is a case where we are talking about consent, and this what you raised, that males should be more perceptive, because that's the crux of the matter here for me.
Okay.
He was just not perceptive to her.
Yes.
To
So that's the nuance that you are talking about, and of course it should not be bracketed in the same way as Israel Horowitz or
Or
Bill Maher.
Or
Is it Bill Maher? I'm mixing it up.
Bill O'Reilly.
Oh man, I am not good with names, guys. Sorry, Bill Maher.
Bill O'Reilly.
Yeah.
And it's like opposite poles of his life.
as well. Or Cosby.
So to have a more nuanced argument about this, should there be a decision making on the degree and extent?
But before that, I want to ask you, what's your evaluation of that story? Is there somebody to actually... does the word blame fits there on someone, and to which extent? I know it's tricky, but...
It's both. I mean, one, she could not say no. That is, no in a way that's like because she admits it herself that she kind of
gave in.
Not gave in, kind of said no, but like this flirty way or whatever, and that's a lack of confidence when you're scared of not somehow pleasing people. That's a problem, and the lion's share is of course his, because he's not perceptive, and if she's saying okay whatever, that's not consent.
If I remember correctly, that was a crucial part of the matter, that there was no
exactly,
there was no explicitly spoken no. You might look into reasons why that was the case, and what do you think that is?
I think it's social conditioning. Women are really, girls especially, are not given the tools to figure out that this is your body and you need to. It's not up for.
You can decide. You can just stop it right there.
You have the right to say no, and it doesn't matter if it's your husband, your boyfriend. It's not like you are kind of giving the keys over. And this is super easy to talk about, but when you're in that situation, especially with someone you care, it's tough. Because men have a lot of, I think not just men, probably human beings have a lot of association of ego with rejection. It's not just men, it's also women have a lot of, so that's the problem as well.
No, but the sexual dynamics for a man and for a woman is fundamentally different. And that is where the crux of the problem lies, right?
But I don't know. Women can also get equally pissed off for a rejection, but just that they can't.
But more often than not, women won't
persuade you.
Yeah,
there's an ego coming there. That
and if it happens, it suddenly is all over media. Like I recently saw some US American guy who was kind of coerced into sex by a woman.
Yeah.
Who basically...
Alyssa Milano thing?
I have no idea. Again, no name. I'm not naming names anymore.
I'm up to date. Was it Bill Maher?
And it was proven because there was video footage that the girl really came onto the guy and really coerced him into it. Like at numerous places of the incidents, you could really see the girl was the one who was making the move. And it was ruled out by the jury or the judge, and that I think became a viral thing online because that just proves the point. There you go.
Just to move
on the other direction.
Before moving out, I just want to close that Aziz Ansari thing, just to close the circle. I think the way I would label this is that guy is just not perceptive at all, probably because of his position of fame in this particular case. He thought, it's just a matter of insisting more. Actually, she kind of flirted with me first, so in a way she initiated this. So now the logical conclusion would be that it's some form of resistance, and then I can overcome it, which was completely wrong in that case. Mm-hmm. But the evaluation from my point of view is that this was a date going terribly, terribly wrong, mostly because of his fault. But it's not, as you said, it's not to be put in the same dimension or the same scale with somebody like Bill Maher. Right? Oh, why did you say that?
You're gonna have to edit that out.
Yeah. It seems for me as textbook example of how a day should not go and how guys should. This is very subjective, but this is just the way the dynamics of flirting are in almost every situation. There's always a lot of reading, a lot of subjective reading of signals, of cues, of stuff like that. It's almost never verbalized. Perhaps it should be verbalized in some, at least at some instance during the flirting, when you're going to get physical. Maybe. But as it happens, flirting relies for the most part on reading things.
But every guy thinks that that everybody else is reading it wrong except him.
Yeah, that's for sure. That's that's what I'm saying. That the problem is that
how do you make it better? How do you read better?
I don't have the recipe for that.
Yeah, exactly.
I don't know what's the recipe for that.
But there is a fundamental problem. Okay, maybe I'm shifting to a complete tangent if you want to. Yeah. So this other example where a man, instead of a man, the woman was an aggressor, or the Aziz Ansari case does not deny that there are other fundamental issues that men have really taken advantage of, like the other examples like Bill O'Reilly, and those are the extreme cases. But you still need to address those problems. Like a lot of times people get away with the entire conversation just talking about an Aziz Ansari kinds of case. But there is, like, even if you get this is a nuanced discussion that we are having with respect to how far we can stretch the boundaries related to this discussion. But even before that, there are fundamental other issues where real damage has been done.
Okay, but then, like, what is real damage? I mean, if you're having trauma in your life, you're going to be very partial to it in terms of your consent, right? Totally. So I mean, and that,
so you have to define the lines.
You have to define the line, and it's always even with Bill O'Reilly, I think the problem was really taking advantage of your power dynamics. That's the main thing. And even with I think there's a conditioned power dynamics which needs to change, like for women as well. If you have contraception coming in and you have a lot of great progression, you don't have, that's not seeped into our heads. That's not like, that's a problem. There's a cultural backlog. There's revolution in terms of techniques, but it's not seeping into us.
I think so. You talk about conditioning regarding the ability of women to just say no, just blurt it out. I don't want to do this, and you say that probably it's, from what I understand, it's a matter of teaching and training and conditioning and that kind of stuff.
But again, I mean, yes, you can say no, but also there is a problem of physicality then.
That's what I want to get at. That's exactly what I want to get at.
There you got it.
That's exactly a good opening to the point I want to make, because I don't think it's
just that.
I think probably that's not even the most relevant aspect. I think a lot of the, probably this is too big a word, but maybe not so much, fear that women experience when they see themselves in a situation in which they wish they could just stop it, but they somehow, they just feel afraid to externalize that.
Physicality.
Yeah, exactly. But it's based more than on conditioning. Sure. It's based more on, I would say, even biology. Just a fear of getting. What's the worst possible scenario that could happen if a woman says, "Go away, I don't want." Or just say no. I don't go on.
Physical danger.
A physical threat. Physical threat. Yeah. By somebody that is very likely to overpower her. Yeah. And that's just, you can even probably find some evolutionary psychological roots to that issue. Okay. I think more than conditioning, it's that realization, whether it is conscious or unconscious, of I am the weaker person here. Yeah. And a woman can never forget that. A guy, it's
can also never forget that he's the strongest sex.
Yeah, but I don't think they have. Guys have that present in their mind all the time, and they don't realize that for a woman, if it happens to be the case that she actually doesn't feel comfortable going along with the sexual interaction, guys are most probably, but they probably don't spend a second thinking, oh, maybe she doesn't want it. Yeah. And the reason why she's not saying it is because she's actually kind of just avoiding conflict.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that's if we're talking about guys being more perceptive, that's a good place to start. I guess I said that there's no recipe, but that's probably one.
So another thing is the power chasm. The difference in the power in Saudi Arabia is much more than in Germany.
But
yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
So there is some evolution that can still be done, and maybe that power chasm can be reduced.
Power in terms of.
But also,
like
sorry, go ahead. No. Finish your point.
Like how the power dynamics the woman feels in Saudi Arabia would be much stronger. Like the man is there to be served.
Hierarchical power in terms of
totally. And also the physical power, like because the feeling of the man having a right over the woman is much stronger, and you kind of accept it.
Social, right? Physical power is throughout societies because just
but you want to you can still close the gap, and maybe there is some level of evolution in the conditioning that has to still happen in Europe.
Yeah, for sure.
And not just the physical part of it. So the physical thing definitely.
I think it's very important. You want to say something?
I think I forgot what I wanted to say.
You got
no, I forgot. If it comes back to me.
Physical, it was about physical power and conditioning and how the roles of.
Yeah.
I mean, it also men need to want to care about that. You have to have men who have to care about the women's consent. Half the time, I mean, I don't know, I don't want to say random shit, but then like, I feel maybe men don't care about consent when it comes to actually doing the act.
I think I understand what you mean, but I think they are mostly oblivious to it while it's happening. It's not so much that they don't care. I think if it's brought up in that context, then they would say, most of them, at least, I would like to believe, are like, okay, yeah, you're right. But it's important. It's an important issue. I believe consent should be given in one form or another, even explicitly or implicitly. But we should go on with this sexual endeavor as long as we both understand there's some level of consent. So I don't think it's that they don't care. It's just that from the male perspective, by and large, there's one driving force. Yeah, one driving force. And it is, I find no other way to put it, it's blind desire.
Okay.
That's what happens there. It's not, there's no space, there's no mental space
to complete anything else.
Yeah, to be occupied in many cases by, okay, let me exercise my social intelligence right now and try to read the signals. There are different stages in the, let's say, flirting process. One of the first stage is the reading signals and acting upon the signals. So let's call it, how to call it? I think the usual word, stage one is the...
Stage one.
the conquering process, but that word is also
chasing,
loaded. Chasing, trying to get to get an opportunity, a real opportunity. Get to a situation with that woman where it's very plausible that it would lead to some sexual interaction. So in that stage, everything is about reading signals.
I totally get it, but then like if you're saying that could be the excuse for every man that I'm not able to control my hormones and that's about it.
No.
And like that's what Bill O'Reilly can come tomorrow and say that dude, I could not. It was blind desire.
Sure, but what I'm saying is it's an explanation is not justification. So I'm just trying to explain what might be happening.
Exactly. That's the root of
the problem, not the situation.
Yes.
Sorry.
So I said that I have no idea about a recipe, but I think probably we're coming up with a little bit of a recipe in that first stage of flirtation where physical contact is not happening yet. Mm-hmm. That's the part where you have to be so attentive about to the signals or cues that the woman might be sending you or not sending you, or even, well, this is the case in which we're imagining the case where the man is kind of making the first move.
Yeah.
It can happen, the other way around is also possible. But just in this context, this one is more relevant.
Yeah. So
that stage, it's prolonged. It tends to be prolonged in one way or another. Even in one night stands, it just never happens that you see a woman that you like and just go for it. And I mean that I like to think it's rare, isn't it?
No.
Really?
Unless you're...
What do you mean no?
It depends. I mean, you're talking about a very liberal bubble out here. I mean, that happens everywhere. That happens in places where men don't care about consent and you're just driven by the blind desire.
For example, locate me in the map.
I think it's all over the world. Wherever it's called rape. Or
Yes,
it's
but
called
you need to get
forceful.
several steps ahead.
Well, several steps ahead, but I mean, it happens. It happens. I don't know the statistics, but it's it's a problem which exists, right?
Whenever it happens, I think we can agree that's terrible, right?
There's no contesting it, but I agree that there is an intrinsic sexual drive which is higher for. I don't know. Is it higher for men?
It's just
It's
more
the way
indiscriminate.
we act upon it is different.
It's more aggressive. Aggression is
Exactly.
It's
Because
more
a
indiscriminate.
woman
It's
would
way
do
more
it probably in a more subtle way of giving the
I mean,
hints,
it's not like women don't have sexual desires.
I
They
think
do.
totally.
I think the main characteristic is not the main characteristic that makes the most difference is that males tend to be way more indiscriminate about it.
Yeah. But we have overcome a lot of our blind desires to do things as well, right? We have to overcome that and be a more civilized society.
Civilization is that.
Exactly.
Withholding primal desires.
Yeah.
Having institutions
Like
to do that.
I'm not killing you for not passing the cup of coffee.
Are you sure you need civilization for that as a prerequisite for that?
But that's what, I don't know what, it's a chicken and egg problem kind of, but that's what makes civilizations possible and progress, that...
Tribes also have things like have like a demeaning attitude towards rape and things like that. Like they also have evolved their own morality. I don't think you need civilization for that.
No, but I don't say...
Took it to a different tangent.
but that's kind of it. I mean, the success of civilizations relies very heavily on the capacity of a culture or society to come up with socially agreed upon rules that are focused on taming desires, taming instinctive desires.
Yeah,
of
for
people.
sure. So social constructs, the culture that you develop is part of playing that role. Yeah. Totally.
I think also, like you said, probably women have a primal fear if you have men who are stronger while saying no. But that's something that women also need to get over and like take on that
I think it's
moment of saying no.
Yeah.
And I mean, it's not just the stages of, okay, what if I want to flirt with the guy, but I then figure out stage 2, stage 3, stage 4, I don't want to do it.
That gets us into a tricky situation because it depends on where you are exactly.
But is there a place where I can't say no?
Yes. Okay, let's agree on that. A no can be thrown out at any stage.
Yeah. Okay.
At any stage. Now, the later the stage,
the more tough it is.
The tougher it is and the riskier it becomes because in the mind, I think it's here we really need to get into the nitty gritty. We really need to get into when exactly that no is coming. Right? If it's coming when...
Yeah, I get what you mean.
If it's coming when both persons are naked in bed.
Yeah, okay.
And then, I'm not saying... Again, this is where I need to get very explicit. I'm not saying that...
Swati is getting popular soon.
I'm not saying that if a girl says no there, the guy is, oh, sorry, too late. It's happening. Mm-hmm. So I'm not saying that. I'm just saying that the reaction from the guy's side most likely will be like, "What's wrong with you? What's happening?"
But I think that's where you have to train women to say that don't give a damn about that reaction. That it's okay. That it's fine to.
Which is possible in some societies and not possible in some other societies.
Actually, it's not possible. I mean, even in Europe, a lot
it varies
of people,
from person to person, probably more.
Varies from person to person, but in my amazing sample set of 6, it's not really.
No, but for them also to have sampled enough men.
No, that is true. But then, that's true.
Yeah.
But it's not that simple. It's not like if you're in a first world developed country, you're going to get all the right tools to say no.
Yeah.
I mean, I totally agree that there is a primal blind desire and there's a primal fear factor, both of which have to be overcome.
Yeah.
But I mean, I think we're also talking about a very liberal bubble situation. I mean,
sure.
Like, okay, if you're going back to like Brett Kavanaugh and Christina Ford, it was not based on any consent. It was just blind desire. It was completely primal instinct, right? And the society right now, that's why I said it's kind of taking a nosedive, because by naming him, she kind of did not get any returns for it.
Yeah, well, that's a little complicated situation, because
I don't know if I took it to some other place.
No. That's fine. That's fine. I just want to backtrack just a little bit to make a final point on that. No, at the last moment, and what kind of reactions are expected. I'm not saying, again, explanation is not justification. So I'm not saying that it is justified that the guy gets so mad and starts blaming and cursing and what the fuck is wrong with you, blah blah blah. No, I'm not saying that, but very likely the mind of the guy is going to be in a state of absolute bafflement, right? It's very likely that that's going to happen, and it's very likely, and it's not incomprehensible, that he's going to try to do oral persuasion. He will try, like, but what happened? Everything was, from a, let's say, consistent point of view, that he in his mind, it's going to be something like, I didn't read any signal that this is going to happen, but it happened. So I would like an explanation of why it happened, at the very least. And that, I don't think that's wrong.
Oh, totally, but it's not like a switch. It's more like a gradual, if you look at the signs, you're going to see it. It's not going to be like okay, whatever. It's not like that. It gradually goes to a no. It's not like the stage 3 went really well and then the stage 10 went bad. It's a gradual thing.
Talking about...
I mean, this is also, again, generalizing. Maybe there are some women who act like switches, but then...
Have more discretization than that.
Yeah, exactly.
This reminds me of a joke from a guy that is also unnameable in this, or very nameable in this discussion, Louis C.K.
Oh, wow.
He had a stand-up where he was actually kind
when
of...
When he came back again? Or
No. Before the cataclysm. He got a stand-up routine where he made a joke. He was talking about, kind of very directly or indirectly, about consent. He said at some point that, males, once they started having sex with a woman, there's nothing that can stop them at that moment. Nothing, just nothing. While it's happening, it's happening. And even she says, if the girl comes out with a picture of his decapitated mom, it's like, oh my god, that's terrible, but he will still keep on doing it. And while women...
There's a movie which was exactly that.
Yeah. While women can actually stop their desire right in the middle of the act. This is a joke, it's comedy, right? But
is that true, do you think?
I know.
I think the switches will be slightly different, located at different.
I know.
Sense.
But if you really think that's the case, I have a point. I mean, then that means that you are not, men in general are not able to overcome their primal fear, primal desires.
It's not that they are not. It's just that it's kind of like an inertia.
Sure,
and blindedness.
Yeah, which means you're not in control of your primal desires.
Yeah, it means that at some point that seems to very likely be the case.
But then how can then it's so contradictory that men are in positions of power wherein they have to make very objective, clear-cut decisions, and it kind of really goes to men without, it just does not.
Yeah, that's why we have wars.
Yeah.
And impulsive nuclear bombs thrown here and there.
But I'm not saying if you have women in control, you're not going to have them.
Yeah.
But maybe you reduce the chances.
No, but that's why we have systems.
I actually think so. Possibly
I'm not sure,
but the impulsive aspect of it, I think men are... Maybe it's a gross generalization again, or maybe I'm completely wrong.
No, but that's why we have systems now. And that's why it's much more unlikely to go to large-scale wars now. Because in the past, there was a king or an emperor. And these guys, you could go to wars for the most mundane, like their honor was somehow blemished or something like that. And then you just, boom.
But
at the heat of the moment, let's go invade that neighboring tribe or whoever mistreated me or blemished my reputation or my honor. And now we have systems. It's not, by and large, there are no dictators. There are some few cases. North Korea, let's say Venezuela, maybe.
A lot of African countries.
Yeah.
ISIS.
Okay.
Yeah, but those dictators happen luckily
US
and
is going that way.
happily not be sitting in the presidency of major military powers. So that's kind of good.
Till now.
Well, Trump
till now, it's only nuclear.
He seems to be very
discussions
emotional.
that
Let's put it that way.
But it's very confusing because men are projected as strong, intelligent, cerebral people, and then suddenly they become people who are not really
Animals.
evolved. Yeah, exactly. Animals who are not evolved and in control. What is true? I mean, is it both or like, you know?
It can be both.
It can be both.
There are different facets of the game. Yeah.
Sure, but then you can't choose. Maybe you can. I don't know. I mean, it's confusing. That's all it is because. You know, you're choosing, you're making a system and choosing the rules according to what favors you. Like
Totally.
here, I'm not an animal.
Totally.
I am like great at what I'm doing, and there I'm an animal because this suits me. right now.
Yeah. So in principle, if we play the argument in this way, then the men are playing the victim card in some ways. Like we are victim to our own desires, right?
I want to make a break.
Yeah.
Because of biological needs, I have
Yeah.
no control over. I really have no control over. We will edit this part out. We're going to take a little tiny break. I don't know how long can
it's
this
just
be
1
running?
hour, 6 minutes. Just
Okay,
1
we
hour,
can
6
still go on
minutes.
for
Yeah.
a little bit more.
Yeah,
This part will
yeah,
be edited
yeah,
out. We're
yeah.
coming back.
And we are back from the break.
Yeah. And
Okay, so where were we at basically? So we were talking about this duality in how we are trying to address to issues related to men,
in terms of stereotypes, that there's
in
this.
terms of stereotypes, like you, in terms of professional wisdom, focus, like driving something forward, we are giving all these values to someone from the male gender.
Yeah, but I think that the issue that we were kind of discussing was more. I think you had a point. Of complaint saying that. So how is it gonna be? Is it the case that which stereotype is true?
Yeah.
That males are on the one hand is cold-headed people, very reasonable, very rational, very calculating, and so on. Always evaluating pros and cons and coming with the most reasonable decision that you can possibly achieve. But at the same time, males also tend to be more prone to outbursts of violence and be hot-headed and impulsive and run by desire and la 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 la. So it's kind of they seem to be like mutually exclusive stereotypes, and that was kind of the thing. And do you want to say something about it?
Yeah, I don't think it's mutually exclusive. I think you played the card depending on the situation, and that's a bit problematic. You cannot leave women out of fields or out of situations based on what is convenient to you. Like
You said off camera that you said you used example a woman trying to enroll in the army, and then what kind of.
So you want a Terminator killing machine, and you kind of say no.
Because you're a woman and you cannot be a Terminator killing machine.
Exactly.
You're not violent enough.
You're not violent enough. Then you go apply for a scientist role, and then they say no, we require someone who is like calm and who is cognitively is good and stuff, and who doesn't cry, and then you're gone. And this has happened for a long time. Somebody who can do maths, which is a very annoying part that little girls are already told in a large number of places where you're bad at maths. And that really, I mean, that's placebo. You carry it through your life. And this has really been going on for long enough. And you see now, that's why you have a glass ceiling. And that's why all the top management right now presently is men. Or mostly.
And if they are women, they are perceived as people, the cold-hearted bitch.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Who has not given enough to her family, or who has not whatever, who has done a lot to.
And the thing is with that is that as soon as you play it out, what if it was a man? So how would you describe that man? It suddenly takes a positive color.
Yeah. Like a ruthless, desire,
ambitious
guy, exactly, and then who does not have any.
Yeah.
So this is a bit difficult to handle, right? I mean, and that's why also right now the power dynamics are such that the men are in the top spots and the women who are trying to climb the ladder, if you
it's getting some lashback here.
No, even if you do have some kind of sexual contact, it's very skewered. How is she supposed to say no? Even.
Okay, I have pushbacks from several fronts on that.
The Terminator. Go
No. I totally get that. The part about the conflicting stereotypes, which, okay, one of them is a stereotype, the other one is kind of fact. So the stereotype is the
Are you sure that no men are going to come up and say, I can control my desires and I can totally...
No, the partly. So the part of men being generally more violent than women.
Yeah. So
I mean,
the Terminator.
So if you look at the distribution of serial killers, I think at least famous there's like 1 or 2 women or something that have serial killers, and everyone else is males. And this is a competition where you don't want to win, right? I mean, there's nothing positive about this, But if you look at this kind of stuff, you always look at the most violent members of society.
Sure.
They're always going to be overwhelmingly males, right? So that's the thing. So that's true. Now you can decide, okay, that's an outcome. That's something that we can measure statistically. And now a different kind of enterprises try to explain where that comes from, and then you go into evolutionary psychology and different strategies, blah blah blah. You can get to formulate an explanation for that being the case. So, but that seems to be like a more solid piece of it's solidly grounded on evidence.
So there's enough like core evidence to it.
Now there are several other things that you said there that I don't know which one
to
approach first. Yeah, it's kind of that, but. Mathematics.
Yeah.
Actually, girls are very statistically. They, at least when they are at levels of elementary school, and possibly even high school, as students, actually, even not only about in mathematics. At the job of being a student, girls tend to be better than boys.
Yeah, but it's right? Go ahead.
They tend to be better at boys than boys. So, and that's also a statistic fact. You might again try to explain why that is so, but that's how it is, statistically speaking.
Yeah.
So that's one thing. Now, being a student requires that you handle knowledge in different fields, and sometimes there's very different kind of cognitive abilities, right? So one thing is you don't need. It's not exactly the same cognitive task to perform mathematical operations than to be good at composing prose or something like that.
Okay.
You have linguistic skills, mathematical skills, visual spatial skills, and there are many other musical skills, you name it, many different things. So, and it turns out that there are also statistical differences between the level of accomplishment in these different kind of cognitive tasks, where you can partition the population on between boys and girls. And here the key point is that there's a huge overlap in almost any of these things that you pick out. And you're going to look at visual spatial ability, men tend to be a little bit more competent at that than women, but it's a huge overlap. If you look at linguistic ability, women tend to do better than men, but there's a huge overlap.
Yeah.
So that's one thing. See?
The problem is the overlap is not represented in the numbers. If you're saying the differences are small, the outcome of the number of faculty professors which exist in physics or in maths or in any field, they're mainly men. And if there's a large overlap, there's only a small difference, it should be represented in the statistics as well. What happens there?
Except, here, this is a weird thing that happens to me a lot, because I very often find myself trying to argue against what I like and I believe should be better or could be improved. But it's just because I really want to get to the first step to fixing a problem. You need to identify what the problem is, regardless of whether you like it or not, or whatever it is.
Yeah.
So that's what I'm going to try to do here, right?
Yeah.
I think the issue of preferences also matter. I think by and large.
But you said there's a huge overlap.
In terms of skill.
Okay.
In terms of skill, like performance. In terms of performance,
and there's a huge not as much of an overlap with respect to
preferences. It's a different thing.
But do you?
So you don't think there is that much of an overlap with respect to preferences?
Let's see. Let's put it like this. So there are many possible explanations. For that. So you're looking at an outcome. The outcome is
male professors.
More male professors, more male presidents, more male politicians.
Let's look science.
More male CEOs. More male professors. That's the outcome. So that's your data point.
Yeah.
That's what you're looking at. Now, you want to explain why that data point is the way it is, right?
I don't think there's one reason, but I want to find out the main reason.
Exactly. So and I believe that there's a confabulation of reasons. So there are many different ones. What I'm against is to look at that outcome, see how it looks like, and evaluate and count the number of female professors and the number of male professors, and immediately think, well, which other explanation could be better than sexism kind of embedded in the system? That's using the outcome as an explanation somehow.
Okay, can I ask you a question? Is it more comfortable if you look at racism as a problem? If in case you see more white professors than black professors, would you come to a conclusion that it's a racist problem?
Not necessarily.
Not necessarily.
It's the same issue.
Okay, go ahead.
It's the same because you want
No, go for it.
I see you're chilling.
I'm listening.
Because it's the same epistemological, I would say, mistake, that you're looking at the outcome.
Okay.
And you're using the outcome to explain itself just by the characteristics of the outcome. In this case, the demographics of the outcome. I'm not saying that racism or sexism is ruled out.
Yeah.
There might be there, but that conclusion you get after the process of investigating what exactly is going on to produce that outcome. Now, it's possible. I'm actually not even saying that I don't think sexism plays any role whatsoever. I think it's a hypothesis. And some hypothesis has to be taken seriously, and find out how based on that hypothesis, which dynamics you should expect to give you that outcome. If sexism is like the main driving force producing this particular outcome. Now there's another thing. So there's the skills set, right? Depends on professors on what. If you look at professors on the so-called STEM fields, like engineering and mathematics, technology, blah, 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 they tend to be mostly male. That's true. Almost everyone it's a man.
Yeah.
If you look at professorships in sociology, biology, the social sciences, for the most part, they tend to be more women.
They tend to be more women than they are in maths, but they are still not overwhelmingly women.
I don't know the exact.
It will still be a bigger male population compared to the women population.
I don't know. I don't know what exactly. Yeah,
yes,
it's possible. I don't know exactly
Statistics, yeah.
what the number is. You
Yeah.
know, I'd be willing to imagine.
But that's important because then your argument of preference is also not really reflected.
No, yeah, it is. Well, it could be. It could be. Because preferences are not necessarily related to skill, right? Preference have to do with choice.
So to bring this argument further, if you go to high schools, I think the percentage of women as teachers is more than men.
Yeah.
And I think...
because it's a lower paying job then?
No, not because of that. I think fundamentally it is down to the fact that biologically women conceive and take a hit on their career and men don't. And I don't know if it's a preference thing. Or it's a society hasn't accounted for that.
You think it's a choice factor in terms of...
because they have to take the hit in terms of their career.
At least 9 months.
It depends on where you're looking at. Because if you sample countries, you get a result that runs against that kind of assumption.
Okay.
The most egalitarian societies that exist in this world with the best social structures, support structures, etc., are the Scandinavian countries.
Yeah, sure.
You have Norway, you have Sweden, you have Denmark. That's it, pretty much. That's a handful of countries. So those are the most. I'm not saying that they're perfectly egalitarian and there's equality of opportunity for everybody, but they have gotten the closest than anywhere else in the world.
Sure.
And what happens there is that the stereotypes somehow are more reflected on the career choices of people. The more egalitarian the society became, the more women tend to opt to become nurses than, I don't know, mathematicians, or more males tend to be engineers and women go to sociology, or whatever the situation is. The point is that there's a divergence.
So as soon as you give them a choice of what you want to do.
As long as the capacity of choosing is enhanced,
this is well studied.
Yeah, this is very well researched, very well, and I think anybody can check it out. Now, is that wrong?
I have some.
Some cutbacks,
some-
pushbacks.
So it's also researched very well. Like women, when they are given college-based maths test, and if they are told that it's a really difficult maths test and a large number of people have flunked it and blah blah, they tend to perform well, and that's just how it works. And the same for black students and stuff. So there is a huge amount of social conditioning which exists. This is again researched. This is not something which is which you can completely deny. I can't say that's the only reason why you have top level professors present there. I don't. So yeah, preference is it's a good thing. Choice is very important and it should be valued. But what you're saying, the present statistic cannot be only explained in terms of preference.
No, I don't think so.
Yeah, I mean, especially Denmark. I was in Denmark Technical University. I could spot. I mean, you could really pick the girls because they would look like such a anomaly.
In which faculty or what was the environment? Which
so I was working in microfluidics, so just
physics,
engineering kind of fields. But that's why, see, that's a problem. Like, the minute you think of engineering, I don't know if it's preference that makes you think of a male image, or if it is social conditioning, or if it's a mixture of both, which is probably...
I think the other element you cannot get rid of, and...
preference.
No, the other thing, like the social conditioning aspect of it.
Yeah.
So for instance, if you are brought up seeing your female role models to be in a very particular... but this is a different tangent I'm going towards. So if... Now I'm got stuck with my thought process. Yeah. So maybe you can continue somewhere and I get back to it.
Yeah, social conditioning. Okay, but curious. Okay.
Sorry, it's also personal. I think it's a lot to do. I mean, maybe it's a bit subjective, but you are constantly facing comparisons with physicists, comparisons with at work. Maybe I shouldn't be saying this.
Yeah.
No, it's fine.
Yeah.
We all know about the big ego of physicists.
Yeah, but I think that's a big toll, and it's actually, I don't know, because I have not seen male biologists as well so much, but I'm sure they would be more welcome into the field compared to the female physicists.
So to close this, I mean, because again, there are many possible directions.
Yeah. So that was the point I was trying to make. Like, so when you're saying that if you get an egalitarian society, like as egalitarian as possible as in Sweden, you see that more representation in psychology, say, for women, and more representation in physics for men. Yeah. But now you go to a less egalitarian society, then you would likely have, like for physics, it's still just men. But for something like psychology, it's a lot less women than it would be if the
engineering, for instance, in a lot of the key take-home message from this is that it seems to be the case that if you create a society where people can actually choose, by their own personal will, just exercising their preference, then tend to gravitate towards these so-called stereotypical occupations more and more.
Yeah.
And what you would expect if you were a proponent of the social conditioning aspect, it should be the opposite, right? The more egalitarian it is, the less social conditioning you might be getting, because you are creating a society where preferences can be really implemented. Yeah. And that's kind of the counterintuitive part of the thing, and the surprising nature of this kind of outcome.
Yeah.
But the numbers should match. I mean, if you're saying in terms of I mean, like, okay, if it's egalitarian, truly
the more
egalitarian,
it is, the more,
you should have the number of women in sociology should actually be more than the number of men in that field. But that doesn't happen.
They are.
No, that actually doesn't happen. I mean, I'm talking about top management places.
Top management, yeah. So again, I don't want to talk in circles, but I don't know what the number is exactly in this. You need to look at a certain place, certain level of academic achievement in this case, and make the demographics of that particular situation. I don't know exactly what it is, but because we have only spoken now as the main factors being, for instance, skills, preferences, But there are other traits there. What he mentioned, the biological imperatives that might differ from between men and women, particularly the reproduction thing of the
Sure.
Women biologically invest more on in reproducing, and it's just that.
They do.
That's just-
I agree.
They're investing
Yeah, that's
time
just-
on it.
But I think
But just to close that, I mean, again, if you're talking about Scandinavian countries, they have very good structural support for that. So that to minimize that impact. Anyway, that's the thing. And the other thing is that a particular trait that is also very important to explain this kind of outcomes is obsessiveness and being very focused on a very narrow practice in a very narrow field. And it turns out that males tend to be way more obsessive because they invest at the distribution. If you have
I get what you
if
mean.
you have a distribution for qualifying the trait of how much you value a particular aspect of your life relative to other aspects, at the tails of the distribution, on almost any distribution, almost any trait, the tails are always, you will always find way more men than females. And in the positive and in the negative.
Yeah.
So both sides. So many of these
And
positions...
that's all hormones and genetics, possibly, right?
It's possible. There has to be some factor. You know, it's, again, you get to qualify. It's a complicated question. Blah blah blah. But what I'm trying to say is that to achieve any top position in anything you do, you need to really sacrifice almost everything else.
Yeah,
You
but
have to be very focused on that thing
But not-
and leave everything else.
Nacho, but you don't even have too much to sacrifice. I mean, in terms of like a woman, actually, in terms of being very obsessive about her career, she really lets go of her longevity of her eggs. So you don't even have that much to really sacrifice. You can reproduce till what age? 80? Till whenever you can.
But these are macro.
I think Nacho's point here is if we get everything in order, like get the most egalitarian society possible and even account for the pushback the woman gets to her career for having kids, you will still get these absolutely different emergent properties on where women co-localize their interest of career and men localize their... And
I get
it
that.
may not be completely conditioning.
Yeah, totally. I agree with
yeah.
that. It's not totally conditioning, but you cannot rule it out.
It has to play some roles somewhere. But my concern is always that...
I don't agree with your obsession theory or hypothesis.
Yeah. I probably don't have a better name to call that particular trait, but it is the case that...
If you want to spin it the right way, maybe like the more positive way, women are better at multitasking than men.
It's possible, I don't know.
Men are...
More unique tasks.
So what he's saying is men are more driven to a certain thing.
And
At the tails of the
tails,
distribution, because we're talking about the extremes.
And the tails are the subtleties also. Like if there's slight difference in the bell curve
That's
for
why I
men and women,
focused on the
the
tails.
difference at the tails will be fundamentally different.
Yeah.
But again, it does not explain why the majority goes to men. Like the major, these are like subtle nuances which would be explained. It has to be reflected in. If you're saying 55% professors are male, 45 are female, I get that. I will say okay, it's preference. It's. I would give you 60-40. I would give you 70-30.
This is so hard. I mean, this is so hard.
You cannot
to put the right. I mean, this is a very, very, very hard thing.
I think the key point here is the first, and something that we'll all agree with, is to have the most egalitarian society with respect to chances and opportunities as possible.
Yeah.
But we don't know how it will play out. Like this 60-40, 70-30 might not be the case. It might be a very counterintuitive result.
Totally, but then I'm not...
Like it might be as counterintuitive as 5 and 95.
Totally, but I'm not playing into the hands of saying that everything has to be equal and women have to occupy 50% of every department. I already said things have to be based on merit and preference as well.
Choice.
That's not... And choice, preference and merit. Both are important. But...
You still feel it's disproportionately skewed.
It's
That's
disproportionate.
Yeah,
my
yeah,
I think
that's
when
for sure.
you're not
So we
giving-
don't have that egalitarian society.
You don't even.
But-
You're not
but
even
again-
close to it.
Yeah.
Again, no, we are. No,
No, you're not.
You're very skewed with your opinions
You're very-
with
No,
respect
no.
to, like, you have Germany in mind when you're talking about the
Yeah,
world.
I'm talking about. Yeah, I'm focusing on because
let's talk about Germany.
we are talking. I was
Okay,
focusing
so even in Germany,
on the context because the discussion we just had was mostly based on what happens as you approach a more and more and more egalitarian society and how the divergence becomes more pronounced.
Sure.
So that was the
but
the key point.
But yeah,
no, I'm granting you it could be an emergent property that is counterintuitive. Yes.
It's not so counterintuitive when you take into account preferences, obsessiveness, the level at which difference.
But then, how would you explain why there are more women as social scientists?
That doesn't explain every preferences. That doesn't explain
But
everything.
they might be obsessive towards getting a social science career, and men might also.
That's why I
be.
focus on the tails.
Yeah.
Because we're talking about the top positions where you really. I mean, to
But
become a
you
professor
can
is not
grant
like-
you can grant the fact that it may also be a 50-50 with some things.
maybe I don't know which.
Not maybe.
thing.
So you're saying it's
possible.
more likely to be very divergent in everything than most of the things that will be.
Let's just
50-50.
put it this way. I'm not from the outset denying the possibility of having a particular field where actually everything else being equal, you mean as an egalitarian society, the outcome will tend to be 50-50.
Yeah.
That might exist. I don't know which field that is.
Yeah. It can't be 50-50,
I have
but
no idea.
there will always be some sort of a subtle difference. And I would imagine in most cases it will be subtle difference. Not most cases. Like if you talk about physical attributes, like physical manual labor, then I guess men win the lottery.
Yeah, no,
with
risky
little-
jobs are overwhelmingly taken by men.
Yeah,
like
yeah.
building skyscrapers, stuff like that, demolition workers.
But the point is, even then it is important to assess if we are making some biases. Like you cannot completely say that okay, this is how it happens.
It's a hypothesis.
Yeah. So you should be wary of the fact that and then check back in every level to see if there is some other root issue that we can address.
I always take it as a hypothesis.
Yeah, but then it has to be a non-zero number, right? Like the number, even if it's based on preferences or in a field for women representation, it has to be a non-zero number for your hypothesis to be right. I mean, it cannot completely be 0 women and 100% men.
Yeah, but I don't know. I'm not aware where exactly that.
Yeah, presidency in the United States, it's 0.
Throughout history, yeah. I mean, sure. I'm not saying that. I'm always taking the hypothesis of some. I don't know. We've been calling it conditioning, but some social mores that are enforced over the generations and have a deep cultural root, and that happens to be widespread with different countries and different societies. I'm not saying that. It's always a hypothesis. I'm always saying just treat it as a hypothesis. It's very difficult to prove, and you need to take all the other ones into account and see to which fraction they are likely to contribute.
Yeah.
Now, so the reason why...
But what we have in our control is to...
The reasons...
Correct social bias?
Just think, for instance, about the issue of having a female president.
The issue?
No, I'm just the case study.
The case study that you address.
This situation.
Yeah.
Whatever it is, it didn't mean in a pejorative sense. Why could that be? So one possibility, it is, society is built in such a way in the US that figures of authority are immediately associated with males more than with females.
Yeah, okay, that's...
So that could be... Actually, this book here talks about that. This is Mary Beard and Women and Power. And she says, basically that's kind of her
idea.
Thesis for the most part, that the reason why this glass ceiling exists for the most part is because we don't have a template that comes immediately to our mind about positions of power and a female character in that.
You don't have like lead role. I mean,
she says this in her talk, even in the book too. She says, think about a president.
You get
most likely the image that will come to your mind, it will be a male. It will be a
Margaret Thatcher.
Indira Gandhi.
You can find it. Angela Merkel, you know.
We went.
Dilma Rousseff. So you can.
The British Prime Minister, May.
Theresa May. Anyway,
That's a bad example.
there's the Golda Meir, the Israeli Prime Minister. Anyway, you can think of
Benazir
examples.
But they
right?
are abnormal.
You can think of examples. They
have valued souls, like Benazir Bhutto also. Like we kind of look at them with such fondness.
Yeah, no, they're way. I mean, there's no question there. It would be crazy to say that they are by far not less.
But Nacho, the amount of backlash they also get is maybe not. I mean, maybe, but that's how politics works. Like Margaret Thatcher or Indira Gandhi, or the amount of backlash that they got for their unpopular policies. Maybe I'm biased, but I would think that it's more than their male counterparts.
Yeah, but I would even think I think it's very plausible that sufficient progress has been obtained from the 70s. Margaret Thatcher was 80s. When was it?
Around
70s?
No, 80s. I think
80s,
along
70s?
with Gandhi, so about 80s. Yeah.
From then till now, I could even.
Oh, but we have.
Was that anyway? Anyway, got distracted. I would not possibly discard that from the outset. I think it's possible.
What progress? I mean, we did not have. India did not have another.
No, these discussions like these are progress.
Yeah,
the
sure.
more they happen, and the more public they are, that's progress. And,
I agree.
And so it
But
doesn't
you
have to be
wouldn't
this
that-
event.
then-
The Me Too thing is an event also.
And in a large part of the world, I think a very important event.
Yeah.
So I mean, it's
To
progress
have
is
that conversation. Yeah.
progress is not necessarily made of these huge, massive events. That those are like quantum leaps in progress, if you want to call it some way. But by and large, progress is materialized through gradual conversations over things and looking at ideas and debating the ideas more and more and more and more. So there's another way. It's a slower way, but it's also a way to achieve progress.
But
It's not be discounted.
I don't even know. I'm thinking of more fields that I can count. Like I can really talk about late night show hosts. I mean,
Yeah, sure.
There's one
Comedy.
Samantha Bee that's about
Comedy.
it, and a comedy, and those are not women are.
And
not,
I think politics in general, I think
Politics.
women can play the same game as men.
women
There's
are-
enough evidence of that.
There's no funny.
Yeah, but again, it's
right?
outcome. It's the same issue, looking at the outcome and thinking that
So
outcome
you think there
explains
is
itself.
no
I think-
role played by conditioning?
No, sure.
I think it's being the bad cop.
Yes, it's possible. Now,
So you're basically saying it may be possible.
no, it's
that-
possible. It's a thing that has to be. No, it's again. Let's talk.
So
Let's talk
as
about.
soon as we start
Let me
talking
give
about
you. Let me give you one
let's
example.
talk about the Middle East,
me
and then
give
you
you-
immediately will nail it to
No, sure.
conditioning, right?
Let me give you one example where there's a arbitrarily set stereotype of what women prefer and males should prefer.
Yeah.
Colors.
Oh man.
Blue and pink, right?
Yeah.
That stems right out from conditioning and as arbitrary social
but
norms.
that's-
So those things happen.
Yeah.
That's possible.
Yeah.
That's absolutely possible.
And,
It
and
happens.
you don't believe that
We-
gender roles are emphasized so strongly on people that we cannot work towards trying to dilute the whole
No,
concept?
it absolutely can happen. That
And
has
they
been
don't
the struggle.
exist in the world?
That has been the struggle.
Yeah.
That is still the struggle
Yeah.
to some degree at varying degrees in different places of the world.
Yeah.
Some places are much
And
better.
your argument will be that in the free world, I'm saying, in most of the places where there's a very sound welfare system, this is not an issue.
No, I'm not saying that. I'm saying that there are many possible explanations, and most likely all of them play some role.
Yeah.
Now, depending on which society you're looking at, some of them will have a higher explanatory power than others, right? So there's you can put it in terms of shares or percentage. So the more egalitarian, the more socially advanced society is, the less this arbitrary, stereotypical assignment of roles should matter. That's all I'm saying. Now, how do you measure that? That's a very complicated question. It's a very complicated thing, especially when you're talking about something like social conditioning. It becomes very, very hard to measure. Now, and you have to come up with very sophisticated methods that I cannot even think of. I mean, people have come up with all sorts of explanations. For instance, toy preferences. So toy preferences between infants tend to be different, starting from 9 months old, across cultures and stuff like that. And there's a certain school of thought, or this conditioning hypothesis has caught the imagination of a lot of people. It might be true, it might be not true in different cases, but in this particular case of toy preferences, the way people explain that from the conditioning perspective is, well, maybe it's because mothers tend to talk in a different tone to their baby boys and their baby girls, or they somehow have a different treatment of boys and girls in the way they talk to them, the amount of time they look at them, stuff like that. Here's the thing. The thing is, okay, let me just finish this and then you. So the thing is that just because there's a difference in treatment in something like the tone of your voice or the amount of time you look at a baby boy or a girl, that cannot explain something so specific as toy preferences. It's just, you're just making a huge assumption just because there's differences in treatment that explains toy preference, which is a very concrete. You go from something very abstract, very general, to explain a very concrete thing. And all the connecting thread, it's not clear at all. How does that happen? How can the fact that I talk to a boy in this tone and I talk to a girl in this tone might be ultimately reflected step by step in they choosing different toys? Who knows? That part is left unexplained. It's just posited that there's difference in treatment, therefore the outcome is explained. But the hard task is to explain the step-by-step connection. And that's never really explained. It's possible, but it's not explained.
It is not never explained. I mean,
in some cases, it might be.
I mean, I think one thing is you just have more of, if you're a girl, you just get more dolls. You're more exposed to those kind of toys, right? Your parents just buy.
There is some preconditioning in that direction. Yes.
You just get more stuff like that. And no one's saying that is the only thread connecting the two, but that there should not be too much of a doubt that it plays some role. The share, I don't know. That social conditioning has some amount of percentage. I'll still come back to I think preference, yes, it is but preference is also a very abstract concept. How can you connect the dot between preference and toy?
No, preference is reflected in choice, right?
Okay, you mean like direct action versus...
So you can capitalize on your preference by choosing something.
Do you think babies are born with, like humans are born with like a particular preference?
Yeah, there's an innate structure.
And it changes genetically from person to person? Or is it like a classification? But then how do you classify?
There must be some... I mean, genetics plays a role at every level.
Sure. And
what's the particular share of the role? I mean, it's hard to determine exactly, but...
Perfect. But then, like, all of us are... even if we have subtle differences, we're all genetically different. Then how do you make such a huge generalization as men and women?
No. So that's where we always tend to mistake. Like, he is agreeing that there is a massive overlap.
There's overlap in almost everything, but there are still...
that needs to be insisted. That definitely with respect to...
And even...
you're not putting it in two buckets, but okay, got it.
And in sex behavior too. I mean, the thing is, it's so curious what we do with men, the human species in particular, because granted, we have constructed very complicated cultures and societies with lots of nuance and lots of complicated rules, but we are still animals. And we are very much embedded within the animal world, and we are perfectly fine with explaining differences in sex behavior in any other animal, even our extremely close cousins, just chimpanzees, bonobos, gorillas to a lesser extent, and so on. And there's no problem. There's just no problem to explain their behaviors in a naturalistic fashion. But when it comes to us, we are very inclined, a lot of people are very inclined to completely discard the biology it's just arbitrary.
Yeah, totally.
Everything is just an arbitrary
so that's
thing.
where I think a lot of us will agree with respect to biology plays a very, very essential role.
Sure.
I think the debate here is totally down to how much of a role conditioning plays and not. And so, can I just address a question?
How much longer should we go?
I think maybe another 20 minutes or something. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
I have a question
Yeah.
before that. No, I forgot what
Go-
it was.
okay, yeah.
Okay, go ahead if
Yeah.
I get it.
That was fast.
I may even go to a different tangent. Do you believe in having an absolutely egalitarian society is the right way to go? Or knowing that the biology is different, the conditioning for men and women should be subtly different?
I don't think there's an absolute egalitarian society.
No, suppose, we should go towards that direction.
What is it? I mean, define it.
Where...
Or it's only preference based.
Yeah, so suppose it's a gender neutral raising of kids, where you are like consciously not biasing.
Mm-hmm.
Suppose where the conditioning for a man and a woman, like maybe is that the direction to go?
I find that very impractical. I think differential conditioning would be a more practical solution to the
Yeah.
problem. I don't
And
think
then
we should.
would you do the differential conditioning to promote the bias between men and women as the biology defines, or try to somehow negate or equilibrate it?
That's a tough one.
For me, the notion of top-down design conditioning, it's already
So
a no.
just let it roll.
It's a no.
Yeah.
That has failed throughout history
Yeah.
in many parts of the world. And the idea that you are going to somehow, I don't know, gather a committee or submit it to popular vote, or I don't know which
No, but
way-
society is evolving. I'm talking about this happening organically.
Sure, but you're talking about modulating or crafting some conditioning strategy to cancel out current day conditioning. That's kind of what you're talking about, right?
No.
I think he said yes.
I think that
Sorry.
so you are saying that there is no social construct building that we should be involved in?
Depends to which extent, but the word, probably it's because the word conditioning rings too many alarms in my head. So if you're I imagine
So it's construct building.
major intervention.
No. I'm not saying that there's a committee which is manipulating. I'm talking about an organic system.
I think I can give you an example in terms of this. So I was talking to a friend of mine, we were talking about this, and I'm stealing it from her. So she's French, and her sister was babysitting. There was a boy and there was a girl, and they were playing, and the boy was tickling the girl. And the girl said, "No, stop it," and she was still laughing, and he continued. And that's when her sister went and said that no. She said no, even if she's laughing and giggling, it's a no. And I think that's something that you need to sort of inculcate.
That's perfectly alright.
But that's conditioning.
Yeah, sure.
It might be a negative term, but you're kind of.
Yeah, that's why I was thinking. It's probably the word seems too loaded for me. But if you talk about specific situations, then I can talk about that specific situation, and I think that's perfectly alright. I see no problem with that.
But that's like
but there are different. Sorry,
No.
But there are different societies in the world where the predominant organic way the culture is being promoted to evolve is to increase the difference, and there are other places where they're consciously looking at how we can reduce the difference.
Listen, I'm almost across the board. I mean, again, we will talk about specific issues, but across the board, I'm almost always in favor about things that happen way more organically than top to bottom.
Yeah, but
so
you're saying that everything happens. There is no human intervention involved.
Of course there is, but it happens. It's a feedback. It usually happens. It should happen as a feedback mechanism of people talking to each other and people interacting with each other and converging for a certain conduct. That doesn't mean that there's no space for nudging every now and then in certain directions if things tend to go into scary directions. You know, like what this rising tide of populist nationalism. Perhaps there are ways. Perhaps there are ways to organize against that in a more organized manner. You know, like.
But maybe you're so patient because you are on the winning side.
Yeah, because but you're right in something that you said. I'm really mostly focused now on the Western, Occidental Europe, Northern Europe, and the situation here. Now, these things that if we had focused our conversation on, say, the Middle East, Sub-Saharan Africa, I don't know, even Mexico, India, we're talking about it's a different thing. You know, it's a different.
So you have a problem with like the so-called hardcore feminists, people who are bashing men, because they are doing it in a very inorganic way.
I feel it's pathetic.
Not organic.
Honestly, I feel, you know, there are these men rights activist movements, and there's this MGTOW movement, men going their own way, and all sorts of things. I find it kind of pathetic. I mean,
but what do you find, like the feminists and the
no, the men's rights activists. I find, like, come on, you know, you have just all these people that raising their voices to lift up all these males that feel left out because society is becoming, according to their worldview, very feminized, and they have no place, and there's a lot of responsibility and a lot of expectations put upon them, and they don't know what to do. And then I feel like, okay, that's, for my personal taste, it's kind of pathetic. I'm not saying that males cannot suffer. Obviously they can, and obviously can have all sorts of mental issues if they are put in a situation of a lot of pressure where a lot of is expected from them in terms of, I don't know, professional success or you name it. It's completely possible, but it seems to me taken out of proportion in some quarters, the discourse that we have around these issues. For instance, all this Jordan Peterson thing and how he's focusing on lifting up all this, the white male, which is being targeted today. I think that's, I mean, come on. I'm just saying,
you won the lottery.
You know, there are certain situations where come on should be a complete argument. Like a self-contained argument, like, come on.
Well, what was that right-wing radio was Bart? Who's Trump followers.
Alex Jones.
Amazing. I mean, that's just like that rhetoric is something that nobody wants to go down.
It's so crazy.
Okay. So at this point, I think we should have some sort of, like, I guess we have closing arguments.
You have to, because I don't know. This has been going on for almost
so
2 hours.
Maybe you say something, I say something, and then. And while we are narrating our life stories, Swati can think of it.
And just very briefly, I'm going to say very short. I think the aspect of conditioning, it's not negligible. I think it's incredibly hard to measure, and I think you always need to look at all the other possibilities and take this as just another hypothesis alongside all the other ones. That's all.
So in my case, I think genetics plays a role, and however much it cringes when we come from all these concepts of equality and liberty and all these things where we want everything to be equal, we try to completely override the conversation over the genetics of it, and it is important to have this conversation. But I think with Nacho and me, I think we may have slightly different barometers of how important or relevant conditioning plays a role. And the other thing that we may be disagreeing with is so I think you are thinking completely in terms of top down is wrong and bottom up is the organic way, but maybe there is another conversation needed to figure out that maybe there should be some top down influence, not completely imposed to some degree. And let it evolve. Like there needs to be like the pushback.
I'm not completely against that. I mean, political systems are also crafted in some sense. But anyway, that's another discussion.
So that's where I am at. And now you have to say something.
I'm not saying that conditioning is the only thing, and it's not that women are crying victim all the time, but men should also not cry victim in terms of, like, you need to figure out whether you want to play the strong guy card or you want to play the weakling card here. And I really do think conditioning is important controllable factor. I don't know what percentage it has, but it's something you can control, and this is something you can work on. I'm not saying make soldiers out of people or whitewash them and do stuff like that, but there are nudges that you can have which could lead to a better, just have better sons, more educated sons and more educated daughters. And I guess that's it. And finally, I guess women also need to work on how to own the responsibility of saying.
So the culture needs to evolve.
The culture, and it's gender neutral completely. I mean, both men and women have to evolve in terms of reaching a midpoint in terms of things. But that doesn't exactly have to be equal.
That's where we might differ, but okay. That's it.
Let's have another conversation in season 3. Thank you for listening.
Thanks.
It's time to say goodbye. Yeah.
Cheers. Yeah.
Bye.
Yeah.
If you like what we do, please help us continue doing it simply by subscribing to our Podbean or YouTube channel, following us on Twitter, liking us on Facebook, visiting us on our website tillthebottom.com, or simply spreading the word. Find the links in the description below. The music you hear in the background is a track called Face to Face, performed by Daphne. Thank you for listening, and until next time, cheers.